There was a time when Game Freak took storytelling in Pokemon seriously. There was a real earnestness in what they were writing. While we did see glimpses of this in Pokemon Platinum's Team Galactic, it really came to a head in the 5th generation Pokemon games. Pokemon Black and White introduced us to a new villainous team, Team Plasma. This team and its leaders, N and Ghetsis, served as the vehicle for what I think is the greatest narrative we see in the entire Pokemon series. Team Plasma and the narrative they present tackles the ethics of Pokemon battling. It talks about how rhetoric and power intersect, and ultimately it tells us a lot about how our world really works. I'm Flyboy, and this is the 5th episode in my series covering the many villainous teams of the Pokemon franchise. In this series, each episode serves as a deep dive into one of the villainous teams of Pokemon, this one of course being Team Plasma. I then judge each team on 4 unique metrics and rank them on my villainous teams tier list. And before you watch this one, if you want to watch the other 4 episodes of the series where I talk about the villainous teams from Team Rocket to Team Galactic, you can hit the tag up in the top right corner and it'll take you to that playlist. But without further ado, I think it's time for us to introduce the masterstroke of Game Freak's writing department, the Machiavellian Pokemon Liberators, Team Plasma. Team Plasma is an organization that looks like a bunch of crusaders whose stated goal is Pokemon liberation. Again, their stated morals and ethics is that they believe Pokemon are confined and trapped by their trainers, and thus they seek to sever the ties between them. And the methods in which they carry out this severance can range anywhere from manipulation to straight out theft, or eventually straight up political authority. Their leader, we find out, is N, their so-called king. This is probably my favorite character in the entire Pokemon series, and I don't want to spoil too much about him right now, but he's very interesting, and his backstory is extremely tragic, but we'll get into that during the plot summary. Below N on the hierarchy are the 7 sages. These are all highly intelligent men from all across the world, with various motivations for joining Team Plasma. Some of them seem convicted about the liberation cause, others may be there for more opportunistic means. Below them, of course, are the grunts. Now, these grunts are a little bit more unique than the ones we're used to in the Pokemon series. Most of them are ideological. Now, you've always had your ideological adherents to Team Galactic, Magma, and Aqua, but especially with Galactic, you saw them sort of function as employees. But it seems like these Team Plasma grunts are all there for the cause, at least most of them. But the mastermind behind this operation, who reveals the true intentions of Team Plasma, is one of the 7 sages, Ghetsis. To Ghetsis, Pokemon liberation is nothing more than a means to manipulate the masses, to help him achieve his true goal, which is world domination. Very unique motivation, I know, but hey, you know, it's Pokemon. However, you will soon find out as we go through the plot summary that the depths of Ghetsis' villainy truly knows no bounds. Plot summary, Part 1. A crushing presence. Our first encounter with Team Plasma is similar to Pokemon Platinum in that it happens very early on. In the first town we visit, Accumula Town, we see a crowd gathering outside the Pokemon Center. Here we see a group of Team Plasma grunts, and we also see Ghetsis giving a grand speech to the people. This is where the idea of Pokemon liberation is introduced. On first glance, not only does Ghetsis seem very charismatic in his speeches, but Team Plasma seems extremely organized. The size of this team becomes much clearer later on, but at this rate we know that it is a very well-run organization. Another interesting thing we see here is Ghetsis almost starting a sort of populist movement among the people of Unova. By using his skills as a speaker, he seems to be employing the first step in any sort of populist movement or revolution, which is challenging assumptions. The assumption he's challenging here is that Pokemon want to be with trainers. The people in the Pokemon world generally take that as truth, and Ghetsis is charismatically challenging that. This is planting seeds of doubt in the people's hearts on the validity and the legitimacy of the status quo. This is a real-world tactic used in politics, and I find it very interesting that Game Freak was willing to engage with something like that. However, the crowd disperses, some are convinced, some less so, and we are left standing alone with Charon, your rival, and a strange man with green hair. He claims to be able to speak to Pokemon and challenges you to a battle to listen to what yours have to say. He claims that Pokemon are confined to their Pokeballs. Now, while of course N comes off as very eccentric, he is also very idealistic, as you can see. He truly believes Pokemon must be liberated, that they are confined, slaves to the Pokeball, and must be set free. After his defeat, you move on and you start to take on the gym challenge, but it becomes ever so clear that Team Plasma isn't just a fringe outsider group, but an ever-present presence in the Unova region. Next, we find ourselves in the Dream Yard where we're looking for Muna's Dream Mist. Muna is a Pokemon and it excretes this mist that is able to be used to manipulate dreams. We find Team Plasma there wanting this Dream Mist, and their stated intentions with it is they want to use it to manipulate the dreams of people in the Unova region to want to release their Pokemon and join the cause of Pokemon liberation. Now, there's some very horrifying implications when it comes to this. I mean, think about how nefarious people would get if we truly could manipulate the dreams of others. So, of course, with that sinking feeling, it is up to you to stop them. The Muna does not want to give them the mist for obvious reasons, and we see a grunt kick it. Now, this feels opposed to their ideology. Why are they willing to abuse Pokemon to liberate them? And it shows that these grunts are just so ideologically attached to the movement that they see any action they do to further the cause as justified. And again, this is a real-life phenomenon we can see in real-life groups and people. And again, I find it just so interesting how willing Game Freak was to tackle these subjects. Now, Musharna, the older sibling to this Muna, comes in to save the day and uses its Dream Mist to manipulate the dreams of the grunts, and a sort of phantom Getsus appears. It is here that Game Freak's able to present to the player who Getsus really is in a natural way. We see a more sinister side of Getsus, the side that only these grunts see, and it shows that Getsus is really just an actor, a character he's playing up to the crowd to arouse support for this cause. And this is where we get to see Getsus's Machiavellian strategies to acquire power, balancing admiration and fear to manipulate his way into power. This dream is enough to get the grunts to run off in fear, and we move on. This takes us to Wellspring Cave, where we see grunts kidnap a little girl's Pokemon and we have to save it. Again, this goes to show just how ideologically attached these grunts are, that they find any sort of immoral or morally questionable action is justified just because they're doing it for a greater purpose. But why do they believe this cause so much? Getsus isn't quite the leader that inspires this type of idealism. So where is it found? With no sense of foreshadowing or anything, this takes us to Nacrene City, where we encounter N one more time. He challenges you to a battle again to listen to your Pokemon once more. And when you battle him, I find it kind of cool that he's only using Pokemon from the surrounding route. Like he's developing friendships as he travels through the region, just like you. In fact, he does call the Pokemon his friends rather than his Pokemon. And realizes after this battle that ideology and rhetoric can only take you so far. Just like in real life, institutional power is necessary to make change. And here he seeks it through the power of Reshiram. Reshiram is the legendary Pokemon of the Unova region, and we'll get into the mythology of it a little bit more, but basically it would give him legitimacy as a ruler over the region. And of course, it's a powerful Pokemon, so it would give him literal brute force if necessary. Totally unconnected to N's desire to find the legendary dragon, surely, Team Plasma is also chasing the legendary dragon and steals a skull from the museum. It seems like Team Plasma will be toying with the mythology and the legendaries of this region, just as Team Magma, Aqua, and Galactic did in theirs. But they run off with the skull, thinking it's Reshiram's skull, I'm sure, into Pinwheel Forest, and you and the third gym leader Berg chase after them. I find Berg to be a lot more interesting than what I remember, because once you corner Team Plasma and you get the Dragon Skull back, he has a sense of prudence towards them and says to stop and not corner them or chase them down any further, to take the W where you can get it. And I think that's a valuable lesson to teach children. You never know what happens to people when they become desperate, when they become cornered, and it's better to just take the victory where it stands. Now, this takes us to Castelia City, where Berg's gym is, and Team Plasma has a hideout located there. This time, the scheme they carry out is they stole Bianca, your rival's mana. You find Getsus and 2 other sages in this hideout, and you, Berg, Iris, and Bianca corner them. Berg, again, impressing me, inquires about Team Plasma's true intentions, their guiding principles, he says, and Getsus answers. Getsus retells the mythology of Unova, about the legendary dragon and the hero that created it, and Team Plasma wants to revive the myth and harness its power. He does slip up a little here and says that this will be his dream, not Team Plasma's. He corrects himself and says it's Team Plasma's, but Getsus' selfish intentions are starting to show through. Team Plasma gives Bianca her mana back, and Getsus shows a shred of humanity, may I say? He says that the bonds between humans and Pokemon are touching, but he casts it aside. And here's where I start to believe that Getsus truly may be the most evil person we see in Pokemon, because it seems like there's these little chances throughout the game, and we'll continue to see it, where he could show some humanity, where he could show some mercy, and yet he refuses to, all for the sake of power. We go into Nimbasa City, and the Grunts are carrying out one more plan to kidnap more Pokemon from the evil trainers to liberate them, and now they're terrorizing a daycare worker. You stop them, of course, and they run into the amusement park. There you find N, and if at this point you aren't suspicious about his ties to Team Plasma, don't worry, it won't be suspicion for much longer. While he is still feigning this sort of friendship towards you, he tells you to go chase after Team Plasma with him. He says to get into the Ferris wheel, and I think this might be the best scene we get in all of Pokemon. It's this very tense moment where it's just you and N in the Ferris wheel, and he finally admits that he is the king of Team Plasma, and you're stuck there in the Ferris wheel alone, and you gotta wait for it to come all the way back down. I just think that is brilliant. I love how they did it. I love how N is sort of like, I don't even know how to describe it. He just is like, he's like, sit down with me. I'm gonna tell you this, and you're gonna have to live in the moment. You're gonna have to stand here face to face with me and accept the reality that I am Team Plasma. He gets down and battles you to help his Grunts get away, saying that as their lord, he is protecting them. I think this shows a very different relationship than what someone like Cyrus had to Team Galactic. N's loyalty and these ideologues that follow him, it seems like he earned their loyalty. It seems like it's reciprocated, and I think that just adds even more depth to the ultimate villainy of this team when you include Getsus, but just how convincing their motivations are. After you defeat him, and it is a well-earned victory for you, because that Sigilyph can be annoying, especially if you're doing a Nuzlocke. But after you defeat him, he says that he is challenging the Pokemon League, that he wants to become the strongest trainer to convince people to release their Pokemon, and that you have to get there as well. You have to challenge the Pokemon League and fight him as well if you want your ideology that Pokemon and people can coexist to prevail. And this is such an awesome element to these games. The story itself is interwoven into the gym challenge. It is brilliant. I love that this game does this. Regardless, something big is about to happen, and you are a part of this ride, so buckle up. Plot summary. Part 2. A storm is brewing. Our next encounter with Team Plasma is in the cold storage in Driftvale City. Here we find Zinzalin, one of the 7 sages, alongside a bunch of Grunts who gathered all of these stolen Pokemon in front of the cold storage. They had escaped from Clay before, and you corner them in the cold storage. Clay arrests them again, and honestly, this part it's not too interesting. It's what happens afterward that is very, very intriguing. When you go in front of the Driftvale City Gym, you see Clay there with the arrested Team Plasma members, and Getsus appears in front of him. Getsus threatens Clay. Clay, one of the gym leaders, very powerful trainer, it almost seems like these gym leaders function as the region's police force, and Clay stands down to these threats. Getsus claims that Team Plasma is a lot more powerful than Clay thinks, and I think he's right. This is a pretty awesome flex of Team Plasma's strength and Getsus' strength, and it's sort of like, a mafia boss threatening local law enforcement to stand down because you don't want your family to disappear or something like that. I thought it was really cool, and it shows Getsus isn't afraid of instilling fear in certain select people to move his way forward. Next, we find ourselves in Chargestone Cave, and because N has grown attached to you, he has found a liking towards you. Him and Getsus want to challenge you, and here we face a trial. You're introduced to the Shadow Triad, a trio of these ninjas who are absolutely loyal to Getsus, and they lead you to Team Plasma. Here you face off against a bunch of grunts, and finally face N once more. He reveals even more of his ideals to you in more detail. He truly believes that battles harm Pokemon. And when Professor Juniper shows up, he says to her face that the Pokédex, her endeavor, like her whole purpose, revolts him. The idea that we can organize these Pokemon into these different categories and confine them to these Pokeballs to research them, he finds it revolting. He believes that this world where these messy, gray ideals of people thinking Pokemon are friends but can also be researched on should not exist. That there should not be a world where people are unashamed to, in his eyes, harm Pokemon. He leaves Chargestone Cave, and you go on to take on the 6th gym leader, Skyla, who's the GOAT, by the way, best gym leader in the entire series. For no particular reason, she's just the GOAT, okay? After you defeat the 6th gym leader, N meets you out in front of the gym, and he wants to talk to your lead Pokemon again. His once concrete and solid idealism is again starting to crumble when he talks to this Pokemon. He doesn't see anything wrong with your bond with your Pokemon. He doesn't see the sort of slave morality that he thought was there. In fact, he even says that if every trainer treated Pokemon like you do, they wouldn't need liberation. He even laments the fact that your Pokemon will be severed from you. But again, N believes he must keep moving forward. I think at this point he understands he's in too deep. This is what he believes, and so he has to keep moving forward. It seems like N's motivation to get Reshiram isn't just to harness the power of this legendary, but is to manipulate the hearts and minds of people by reviving the hero story that is so entrenched in their Unovan mythology. Speaking of Reshiram, this takes us to Dragon Spiral Tower, where we hear Team Plasma has breached and entered, and we chase up after them. You defeat grunt after grunt, and at the top we find N standing in front of the legendary Reshiram. Here we see that N is starting to formulate this grand battle he has in his mind. He sees you as an ideological rival and wants to have an ultimate battle where he, with the power of Reshiram, challenges you with the power of Zekrom in some grand ultimate battle of ideas. Now, this obviously just comes from the mind of this eccentric N. I assume, and we soon find out, that Getsus doesn't really like this idea, but goes along with it for the sake of upholding N as their lord anyways. Well, you heard it. You need to find Zekrom, okay? To do this whole battle, you gotta find Zekrom. So this takes you to the Relic Castle in the Desert Resort, where instead of finding the Dark Stone to awaken Zekrom, we find Getsus. He doesn't seem as interested in this battle, but he says N chose you, and so you must carry out this duty for his king. He tells the current champion that he's essentially irrelevant. He basically tells him that N is so powerful, you're gonna lose anyways. You're an afterthought. You're irrelevant. And the champion's almost a little offended, but Getsus shows a very sadistic side of himself when he says he likes to see the moment in which someone gives up all hope. Yeesh, this guy is something else, isn't he? We get the Darkstone and we continue to march towards the Pokemon League. And on Tube Line Bridge, we run into Getsus one more time. Just you and Getsus, and the Shadow Triad, of course. This is where Getsus reveals this battle, it's irrelevant. It's not necessary. It is just something N wants to do. And he reveals that he raised N from birth, essentially, to fill this role as the hero of Unova. He raised him to be able to awaken Reshiram. It's a lot more sinister than it sounds, which we will find out soon enough. Do you really think a man like Getsus, from what we've seen, is going to raise a child correctly? In Opelucid City, we see Getsus give one more grand speech about Pokemon liberation and how he literally says the trainers are oppressing their Pokemon, and he leaves, and we learn more about the hero mythology of the Unova region. Now, this is just some lore stuff. It's not really necessary for the story, but it does help cement the idea of what N and Getsus are trying to achieve through deception.
The story goes that there's this dragon and these brothers who are heroes, and one has his idea that they shared split into two, and then the brothers fought with each other again until they got tired and gave up.
But all you need to know is that it's a foundational belief in Unova that the hero and the dragon created Unova. Team Plasma seeks to manipulate people by reviving that myth and claiming that N, the king of Team Plasma, is the hero and thus the king of the region. Just like all leaders need to establish legitimacy to wield power effectively, Team Plasma will do it through this myth. Plot summary. Part 3. The Battle of Ideas. Once you defeat the Elite Four and get to where you would face the champion, you see that N has already defeated him. Surrounding the Pokemon League rise up these giant castle walls. This is N's castle. Very, very expensive infrastructure, but you know what? I respect it. And it is time for you to follow him into his castle and challenge his ideology. But before we go in, we encounter the other 6 sages. This is where we start to see a little bit of a dual loyalty, where they admit they're going to disappoint N by challenging and defeating you now, but it's all for the sake of Getsus's master plan. Regardless, the gym leaders help you challenge the sages, and you get to move on into N's castle, where we learn even more about N's tragic backstory. There are 2 women in one of the rooms in this castle that were also raised by Getsus. One, Concordia, tells you Getsus raised N from a very, very early age, only surrounding him with Pokemon that had been abused by their trainers. Getsus raised N to shape him into this ideologue that truly believed Pokemon and trainers were incapable of living amongst each other. All of this was to get N to be worthy to awaken Reshiram. Yes, Getsus manipulated a child for over a decade at least, just so he can have access to Reshiram one day to establish power and dominance in the region. I don't think there's a better definition of someone treating human beings as means rather than ends. Anthea tells you that N has already realized that trainers don't really want to hurt their Pokemon. But again, he's just in it too deep. He's come this far. He doesn't want his life up to this point to be a lie. Here we see the grunts sort of be more open about the sinister aims of Team Plasma, and I find this very interesting because it shows that the grunts weren't all ideologues, that there were some that were more opportunistic in nature. And we also see N's childhood room, which just knowing what Getsus did to this child gives it a very eerie feeling, that's for sure. Now, before you go to challenge N, you run into Getsus one more time. He mentions how N was the perfect specimen to unlock the power of Reshiram. Reshiram, the hero who will bring legitimacy to Getsus, or Team Plasma. Team Plasma, of course. The mask is fully off. Getsus just lets you know that he wants to use this myth to manipulate people to get rid of their Pokemon so he can control them. These people will be left powerless. And ultimately, who knows that N is the perfect specimen more than Getsus himself, who spent over 10 years manipulating N to become this perfect hero. You finally meet N, and he seems disappointed that you don't have Zekrom, that it's not awakened. It reeks of this sort of desperation from N. He's obviously conflicted. He doesn't quite know what's going on. He just wants to be proven right or wrong, for that matter. But eventually, Zekrom does wake up. You capture Zekrom, and you guys have this ultimate battle of the ideals once and for all. And you're victorious, of course. It's a video game. You have to win. But you're victorious. And N says that everything is ruined. Now, unlike the mythological story of the heroes, where they conclude that neither of them is correct, N deliberates whether you and him, the two heroes, could both be correct. Could the idea that Pokemon are these beings worthy of dignity and respect, and also can live alongside trainers and Pokeballs, coexist as one? Yeah. Yes. Now, before you get too happy, Getsus appears one more time. This guy. And oh my gosh, like, he comes in, immediately starts insulting N. His son, by the way, his son. He says immediately that N isn't worthy to bear the same surname as him. He claims that the only reason that N cares about anything is because of him. He engineered him to do so, and that N was nothing more than a tool for his gain. He calls N stupid for challenging you, the trainer. The battle was already won. The champion was already defeated. Why did you have to mess it up? He calls him a warped, defective boy. And oh my goodness, Getsus, this dude, this is his son he's talking to, and he sees him as nothing more than a tool, a defective one at that. He then turns to you, the only witness of this battle that delegitimizes N's claim to rule Unova, and says that you must be eliminated. After you defeat him once and for all, Getsus goes on a god-complex rant. He says that he is perfection. Alder, the champion, reaches out to N, and Getsus cuts him off, saying that N is a freak without a human heart. He has nothing but contempt for humanity in general, but especially his son. He's taken away by Charon and Alder, and you and N talk for one last time. N admits that first battle, where he saw the bond between you and your starter so strongly, is what really broke his foundation on this ideal that his father instilled in him from such a young age. Over time, he kept feeling more and more unsure about it, and now he has to figure out what he himself believes, not what Getsus convinced him to. He then says farewell, and the credits roll. Plot summary. Epilogue. Unfinished business. So after you get through the credits, you run into a very familiar face, Looker of the International Police. If you watched my last episode about Team Galactic, you know this guy, and he's looking for the 6 sages that are left. 6 because they've captured Getsus already. When you find Rude, he tells you he seeks to understand the heart, and Getsus had him duped. It seems like his love for N is what had driven him to join. Gorm seemed enamored by N's vision. Ryoku reveals that Getsus got away, he is escaped, and seemed to enjoy the camaraderie of the 7 sages, which fell apart when Getsus revealed his intentions. Zinzlin doesn't seem to care for the ideology at all. He just wanted to feel alive. He wanted to pursue something higher, and Getsus gave him that feeling. Bronius challenges you again in Chargestone Cave, just like Getsus did, and he seemed to have been convinced of N's ideology, but not anymore. Finally, Giallo. He spoke some platitudes about people in Pokemon. We're told by Looker that someone spotted the legendary Reshiram, so we know N is out there, but that's it for the plot summary. Now it's time for my rating and review of Team Plasma, and if you couldn't tell by the thumbnail and the title already, I love this team, so I'm just going to give you the quick rundown. The 4 unique metrics I rate these teams on is, first, their motive. How compelling is their motive? Does it line up with their actions? If it's world-changing, universe-altering motives, I'm going to expect there to be universe-altering plans to get there. Next is villainy. Are these teams actually villainous? Are the actions they carry out actually evil, or can they just be sort of written off as people who are misunderstood? Next is plot. How well does this team fit into the overall narrative of the story? In this case, they are the narrative of the story. And how compelling is it? What themes do they teach, and how well do they teach these themes? And, how well is the pacing? Next is aura. This is the X factor. It's just my opinion, what I think of them. Generally, their presence, how they look, are they cool? So this is just kind of my opinion. So if you don't really like my opinion, I'm sorry, but it's going to be there. For each of these metrics, I give them a score between bad, mid, great, and excellent. So let's get started. Motive. Excellent. This one's pretty simple. Pokemon liberation is the facade, and world domination is the goal. I think it's so cool how you have these warring ideologies happening behind the scenes. The grunts are very ideological driven. Their crimes they justify because of this ideology, and I think that in and of itself is like its own type of motivation that's compelling. But then you have N, who was raised from birth to have this ideology as well. Then you have the 7 sages, who some of them seem like they just want a slice of the pie of Team Plasma's dominance. Others are more ideological driven as well. And ultimately Getsus. Oh my goodness. His motivation of world domination lines up perfectly with his actions. He sees every single person as a means to an end, as just another tool to manipulate to get to where he wants to be. I think it's brilliant. I love the motivations across the board. All of them, all the different ones, whether it's the grunts, N, the sages, Getsus, I think they all lend to a great and compelling motivation. Villainy. Excellent. I mean, I talked about it already. The grunts, they themselves commit a lot of heinous acts, abusing Pokemon, stealing Pokemon. They do these very evil things and justify them through the ideology. But I think the true villainy, and you all know I'm talking about, who I'm going to talk about, it's Getsus. He is just so freaking evil. You see it through the whole thing. He manipulates a whole group of people, the whole world essentially, that this Pokemon liberation thing is so serious and should be taken seriously. He causes a whole populist revolution about Pokemon liberation. He raised N from almost birth. I don't know how early he raised N from, and manipulated him from a child just to get access to Reshiram. Eventually, he has nothing but contempt for this son. He's sadistic, he's evil. He is Machiavellian in the sense that he will stop at nothing to pursue power. He employs all the different methods, balancing admiration through N with fear through his coercion and his tactic. He uses deception and lies through this Pokemon liberation facade to get what he wants. He knows how to use rhetoric. He knows how to use power, and he employs it very cold and unfeelingly to get what he wants. Getsus, I think, is the perfect villain, and we're not even done with him. Just wait for the next Villainous Teams episode. Plot. Excellent. I don't know if I have to say much more about this plot. We went over a lot of it in the plot summary, but I love the narrative that is presented here. There's so many different themes that this game touches on through Team Plasma. Like I said, rhetoric and power, Getsus employing those different strategies unfeelingly. He uses deception. It really teaches children about how the real world works. It teaches children that it's not what people are saying, It's what they're doing, it's who they are that truly matters. Getsus could tell you all these platitudes about Pokemon liberation and how we're oppressors, but that didn't really matter because we knew who he was. I think that's a wonderful lesson to teach kids. And in regards to the pacing, they're present throughout the entire game. It never feels like there's these big gaps where nothing happens. I love the pacing of this game, and I mentioned it in the plot summary, but I love that this story coincides with the actual ending of the game at the Pokemon League. Wonderful. Just love it. Aura. Excellent. Look, I know, this might sound hypocritical and very biased because I gave Team Galactic a mid-score, and they look goofy. And I know Team Plasma, they kind of look goofy, okay? They're redheads, they're gingers in these, like, Crusader outfits. But they're in Crusader outfits. They're in these knight outfits. It's freaking awesome. It goes in with the theme of N being their king. And I love it. You know, they're putting off this idea that they're these great moral liberators, and I think the costumes fit perfectly. They look well organized, and they look like they're fighting for a good cause. Also, the castle, that's Aura. Okay, the castle, they built a castle underground around the Pokemon League because they knew eventually N would beat the champion and they could just do this. They could Aura farm by letting this freaking castle surround it. I thought that was awesome. And finally, N. I love this guy. I love this character. Not only does he look cool, but the way he challenges the character, the way he grows himself, it's just so cool that Game Freak was really trying to make a compelling character here that had substance, that there was more to him than meets the eyes. It was an earnest attempt at a real character with a real character arc, and I love it. So that's my ratings. You can argue with me all you want. Is it biased? Probably, but you know what? They're the GOATs, okay? So you already know where I'm going to rank these guys. So let's just get the tier list up. We're going to put Team Plasma at a S ranking. They're absolutely the best villainous teams in this franchise. I just love everything about them. The story, the plot, their motivations, just how evil, especially Getsus is, just how evil Getsus is. These are true villains, and Game Freak really, really tried to make them as compelling and as interesting as possible. Thank you so much for getting this far into the video and watching the video in general. I really appreciate it. A verse I would like to share with you that coincides with this idea of Team Plasma being these moral presenting people with sinister aims is 2 Corinthians 11:14. It says, "And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light." Again, I think a great message this game teaches children is that there is more than meets the eye. There is more than just the rhetoric of what someone is saying, and that we shouldn't trust things just because they present as good. Even the devil himself can present as an angel. We need to be discerning and careful about what people are saying. But regardless, again, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit that like button down below if you enjoyed it. And don't forget to comment your thoughts on Team Plasma and the video itself. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Helps the channel out a ton, and I'm very appreciative. And don't forget to share this with all the Pokemon fans in your life. I know you know at least one Pokemon fan. Just go and share it with them. Again, I appreciate it. But that'll do it for me. Again, I'm Flyboy, and until next time, peace.